Okay, y'all. Sit down. Close the door. Put your phone face down, because what I am about to walk you through is the most publicly humiliating 168 hours any veteran rapper has survived in modern hip-hop, and I do not throw that sentence around for fun. Rick Ross has been in this business for 2 decades. 20 years of platinum plaques, 20 years of ad-libs that became a personality trait for an entire generation, 20 years of being the last man standing from an era that ate almost everybody else alive. And this week, the numbers that came back on his album made grown executives go silent in group chats they have been running since 2009. Because here is the part that stopped me cold. The number that went viral. The number that had every comment section screaming, the number that got turned into 1,000 memes before lunch, was wrong. It was wrong twice. It was wrong in 2 different directions on 2 different days, and every time, it was wrong in a way that somebody else profited from. So by the time I finish laying this paperwork out, I need an answer from you in the comments, and I need you honest. Did Rick Ross flop? Or did Rick Ross get flopped? Because those are 2 completely different situations, and only one of them has a suspect standing over the body with a caption already typed. And before you type it in the comments, no, this is not only about 50 Cent. Drake is in this. Drake is in this in a way that nobody has explained to you properly yet. Let me set the table properly, because a lot of the accounts running with this story skipped the boring part, and the boring part is where the whole case lives. Set in Stone was not supposed to be a quiet release. This was a milestone project. 20-year anniversary energy. A victory lap. A grown man luxury rap statement from the man who helped design the template for what luxury rap even sounds like. He had a car show, a tour announcement, a press run, podcast appearances, a 19-track album, and a features list that reads like an all-star weekend roster. On paper, that is not a bad news cycle. On paper, that is a coronation. And then the projections leaked. The first whisper that hit the timeline was a forecast, not a fact, and I need you to lock that distinction into your brain right now because it matters for everything that comes after. The early industry projection had Set in Stone landing somewhere under 26,000 equivalent album units, which meant no top 20 debut. Now, is under 26,000 embarrassing for a legacy artist in this streaming climate? Honestly, not remotely. Half the rappers you love are doing worse, and their publicists are calling it a soft rollout. But a projection is a rumor wearing a suit. And once that suit walked into the room, everybody in the building started making things up. Within a day, the number mutated. Suddenly, it was not 26,000. Suddenly, the internet decided the album had sold 2,000 copies. 2,000. Somebody said it, somebody screenshotted it, somebody put it on a graphic with a laughing emoji, and it took off like it had been notarized. And I want to be extremely clear. That 2,000 figure was never confirmed by any chart body. It was never sourced. It was never traced back to a single reporting entity that anybody could name out loud. It was vibes with a decimal point. But it did numbers. Oh, it did numbers. That fake little figure outperformed the actual album. Then the real reporting started trickling in, and this is where it gets interesting. One Wave had Set in Stone debuting at number 45 with roughly 17,200 units, the breakdown showing the overwhelming majority from streaming equivalents and only around 2,000 from actual physical and digital purchases. And look at what just happened. Around 2,000 pure sales. Do you see how a boring line item inside a chart breakdown got stripped of context, stapled to the word album, and turned into the biggest hip-hop story of the week? That is not an accident. That is how a narrative gets built. Somebody took the least flattering row on the spreadsheet, deleted the rest of the spreadsheet, and handed the internet a headline. And then the final, official number landed. Set in Stone debuted at number 39 with 19,000 equivalent album units in its first week. 19,000. Number 39. So let me count the versions with you, because I want you to see the whole receipt at once. Version 1, under 26,000, projected. Version 2, 2,000, fabricated. Version 3, 17,200 at number 45, reported. Version 4, 19,000 at number 39, official. For different numbers. One album. 1 week. And I want you to notice something that almost nobody online bothered to notice, because it did not fit the joke. The final official number was higher than the leaked number that everybody was laughing at. It went up. The story got better and the internet had already moved on, because a correction has never gone viral in the history of this platform. Corrections do not trend. Only the funniest wrong number trends. Now, here is where I put my glasses on, because this is the part where I need you to understand that I am not defending anybody's album. I have not been hired by Miami. I am simply the internet's unpaid bookkeeper, and the bookkeeping is not adding up. Because the moment those early figures started floating, one man was already at the door with his coat on, keys in hand, caption pre-written. And you already know who I am talking about. Curtis. 50. The man who has turned a 2-decade grudge into a fully diversified media portfolio. 50 Cent did not wait for the official chart. He did not wait for the correction. He did not wait for anything, because waiting has never been part of the business model. Within what felt like minutes of the projection chatter, 50 Cent was on Instagram doing what 50 Cent has been doing since flip phones. And the caption that he ran with is honestly a masterclass in cruelty, so I am going to read it to you exactly as it went out, because the wording is the whole point. He wrote that Ross had gotten away with it for a while, but it was over now. The jig was up, 20 features and under 10,000 sales, and then he closed it out with a damn boy, it's over. 20 features. Under 10,000 sales. Now hold on, because there is a piece of engineering inside that sentence that I need you to see, and it is the reason that post traveled further than any of the actual chart reporting. 50 Cent did not attack the music. He never does. Attacking the music is a matter of opinion, and opinions can be argued with. 50 Cent attacked the math. Because math feels like evidence. Math feels neutral. Math feels like it walked in wearing a lab coat. And when you pair a real, verifiable, checkable fact, the feature count on the track list, with an unverified, uncheckable, deliberately deflated sales figure, the credibility of the first half quietly loans itself to the second half. The true thing carries the false thing across the finish line on its back. Let us look at the feature count, because the feature count is real. Set in Stone runs 19 tracks. And by the counting that circulated all week, 14 of those 19 tracks carry a guest. 14. Which means the overwhelming majority of a 19-track album has somebody else's voice on it. Now, is that a crime? No. He has always been a curator. His albums play like dinner parties where he is the host with the best wine cellar in the building, and half the reason people show up is to see who else got invited. That is a legitimate identity, and it produced some of the best posse cuts of the last 15 years. But when the units come back low, a features-heavy tracklist stops being generous and starts being Exhibit A. Because now the argument writes itself. 20 cosigns, 14 guest appearances, an all-star roster, and this is the return? That is not a music critique. That is a business autopsy. And 50 Cent performed it in a single caption without ever having to listen to the album. Which is the trick. He never has to listen. He just has to count. Now here is where the story turns, because Rick Ross did something that I genuinely did not expect, and that I think a lot of people misread completely. Ross did not defend the number. Think about how strange that is. A man's commercial performance is being dragged through every comment section in America, and instead of coming out with a spreadsheet, instead of coming out with a "actually my streaming is still counting" thread, instead of the classic wounded artist statement, he came out and changed the subject entirely. And he changed it to real estate. A fan slid into his messages asking how he felt about what 50 said. And on camera, playing it completely bored, he essentially asked what 50 had even said, then pivoted and asked how things were going over there in Shreveport. Shreveport. Y'all, that was not a comeback. That was a scalpel. Because for anybody who has not been keeping up with the extracurriculars, 50 Cent has spent the last stretch of his career building a production studio operation in Louisiana, in Shreveport, positioning himself as the man bringing a film economy to a city that needed one. It has been his whole second act. It has been the thing he brings up in interviews when he wants to remind you that he is not a rapper anymore, he is an infrastructure guy. And without raising his voice, without a diss track, without so much as a full sentence of effort, he walked over and knocked on that door instead. And then he kept going, and this is the part that made me put my cup down. He started asking, out loud, on camera, whether Curtis had paid people back. Whether the money that got borrowed got returned. Whether the loans he was reportedly looking for came through, and whether the reason they did not come through is that the people holding the checkbook were simply too smart. He questioned whether Hollywood needs another film studio at all. And then he said the man's government name. Curtis. Twice. With love. The way your auntie says your full name when she is done playing with you. Now, I have to put my disclaimer down right here, because I am not in the business of stating other people's finances as fact. Those are Rick Ross's characterizations, framed as questions, delivered as shade. There is no confirmed reporting attached to any of it that I would put my name behind. But strategically? Strategically, that response is one of the most efficient counterpunches I have watched in a beef this old, and here is why. 50 Cent attacked Rick Ross where he is weakest right now, which is the chart. Ross responded by attacking 50 Cent where 50 Cent has decided his legacy lives, which is the empire. One man said, your album did not sell. The other man said, your business does not close. And only one of those two things can be checked by a chart on a Tuesday. You following me? 50 picked a fight about numbers. Ross picked a fight about solvency. And then 50 Cent, being 50 Cent, kept posting. Because of course he did. There was another round where he reacted to the reported figures with a straight, flat, almost lazy jab about just seeing the record sales and a 2000, and that one hit harder than the long ones, because brevity is his actual gift. Then came the part that lives rent-free in my skull. Ross had reportedly been referring to 50 as Dollar General instead of 50 Cent. Which, respectfully, is funny. That is a funny piece of writing. 50 cents versus $1. It is a joke about inflation, valuation, and discount retail all at once, and I need whoever workshopped that in the studio to know I respect the craft. But this is the trap of a 20-year beef, and I want you to sit with this, because it is the actual thesis of everything I am about to show you. When two men have been fighting this long, the fight stops being about who is right. It becomes a shared business. It becomes an annuity. Every single time one of them speaks, the other one gets a news cycle. Every time one of them posts, the other one's name trends. They are not enemies anymore. They are coworkers who hate each other and cannot afford to quit, because the hatred is the most reliable revenue stream either one of them has had in years. And that brings me to the receipt that changed my mind about this entire story. I came into this week thinking it was a sales story. It is not. Hold on, let me pull the file, because this next part is what nobody wanted to talk about. Because while everybody was busy arguing about 17,000 versus 19,000 versus a made-up 2,000, a completely separate story was quietly running in the background, and it was, in my opinion, far more damaging than any chart position could ever be. The tour. Rick Ross announced a run of shows. And somebody, being nosy in the way that I fully endorse, went and pulled up the seating map for one of the dates. And what circulated after that was a screen full of green. Green dots everywhere. Green meaning unsold. Not a scattered handful of gaps in the nosebleeds, which every show on Earth has. Visible, structural emptiness in a building in Miami. His city. The city he has been unofficial mayor of for 2 decades. And then came the detail that made the whole internet inhale at the same time. A promotion started circulating. Buy one, get the second at 50% off. Buy one, get one half off. Y'all, that is not a ticket strategy. That is a clearance rack. And I want to be fair, because I am always fair even when it is not fun. Buy one, get one deals are common in live entertainment. Venues push them without the artist ever approving a thing, and half the time the artist finds out from a fan post. That is a boring explanation, and it is probably a big part of what happened here. But perception does not care about boring explanations. Perception saw a man who built an entire persona on abundance, on the biggest house, the biggest chains, the biggest cars, the biggest everything running a 2-for-1 special. And the gap between the brand and the promotion is where the humiliation lives. That is why that screenshot outran every article written about the actual album. It was not the emptiness. It was the irony. And it is at exactly this point that a third name walks into the room, and once he walks in, he never leaves. Drake. Now, I need to handle this section with surgical care, because this is where 90% of the commentary on this story completely lost the plot, and I refuse to hand you a conclusion I cannot support. Here is what is actually true and verifiable. Rick Ross and Drake, who spent the better part of a decade making some of the most commercially dominant records either of them has ever been attached to, ended up on opposite sides of a very public falling out. Ross took public shots. He went on record calling Drake's last project, Iceman, horrendous. He questioned whether Drake even writes his own material. He performed one of their biggest shared records live and made a whole bit out of doing it without the Drake vocals, telling the crowd to sing that part themselves. Let me sit in that for a second, because it is genuinely one of the wildest strategic decisions I have watched an artist make in real time. Aston Martin Music is not a Rick Ross deep cut. It is one of the most beloved records in his entire catalog, and a meaningful chunk of why is the hook. Standing on a stage and removing the most recognizable feature from your own song, on purpose as a statement, is a flex that only works if the crowd is on your side. And the internet, being the internet, decided the crowd was not. So the album drops. And the moment the first week numbers hit, the entire commentary class arrived at the same theory within 6 hours of each other, which is always a sign a theory is comfortable rather than proven. The theory was simple. Drake's fanbase did not show up. And more than that, they actively did not show up. One commentator laid the math out in a way that got repeated everywhere. The argument went that roughly 70% of hip-hop's active listening audience overlaps with Drake's fanbase, that maybe 15% of it are his, and that critically, almost every Rick Ross fan is also a Drake fan. While the reverse is nowhere close to true. The conclusion being that when you make people pick a side, the side with 70% wins and the side with 15% gets what is left over. Same commentator argued that if Ross and Drake had never fallen out, he moves 40,000 units easily. Guaranteed, he said. Promise you. Now, is that math real? No, absolutely not. Nobody has that data. Nobody has ever had that data. Those are percentages pulled from the same place as the 2000 figure, which is the human imagination. There is no fan overlap census. There is no confirmed evidence anywhere that Drake told a single person not to stream this album, and I want that on the record loudly, because a lot of accounts blurred that line all week and it is irresponsible. But here is the uncomfortable part. The theory is unprovable and it is also not stupid. Because something real sits underneath it, and it has a name. Pick a side culture. Over the last 2 years, hip-hop stopped being a genre and started behaving like a political party. Every release gets processed through the question of whose team you are on. And when a legacy artist plants a flag against Drake, some unmeasurable slice of casual listeners simply decline to press play. Not out of loyalty. Out of exhaustion. And then there is the theory that made me genuinely laugh out loud, and then genuinely stop laughing because I could not immediately prove it wrong. The algorithm theory. Somebody on a panel said, out loud, on camera, with a straight face, that the algorithm itself is against Rick Ross. And when they got pushed on it, when the host said, hold on, are you telling me the algorithm is punishing this man because of who he talked about? The answer did not get walked back. It got expanded. The argument was that Ross spent his rollout talking about things that were not the project, so the machine fed the audience the version of him it thought they wanted, which was the fighting version, not the music version. And listen, I laughed. I did. Somebody on that panel was visibly trying not to smile. There is something objectively hilarious about a grown man explaining that a recommendation engine has personal feelings about a rapper from Carol City. But then I stopped laughing because underneath the silliness there is a real mechanism, and most people do not understand how it actually works. Recommendation systems do not have opinions. They have appetites. They feed you more of whatever you already engaged with. So when Rick Ross does a press run, and the clips that get pulled from that press run are the confrontational clips, and the confrontational clips get the comments and the shares and the watch time, then the system learns something very specific. It learns that the profitable version of Rick Ross is the beefing one. So the next thing it surfaces is more beef, not more music. Not because it dislikes him. Because we clicked. We did that. Not the machine. Us. And that is the actual tragedy sitting inside this entire news cycle, and I want you to hold on to it because it comes back at the end. Rick Ross gave the internet exactly what the internet rewards, and then the internet used it as the reason not to listen to him. When he went on a major podcast that week, the clips that traveled were not about the album. People tuned in to hear what he would say about Drake, and when the clips were not about Drake, they underperformed. The audience showed up for a fight and left when the fight did not start. That is a media environment problem. He is the one holding the bill. Now let me give you the other side, because there is a strong other side and the people making it are not amateurs. Multiple veteran voices in that same conversation pushed back hard on the flop framing, and their argument is the one I find most persuasive. He was never that artist. Not in this decade, not in the last one. He has never been a first-week fireworks guy in the modern era. He is a long-game operator. He puts out a project, tours it, licenses it, syncs it, books it, attaches it to the car show and the wing business and the champagne, and 18 months later, he has extracted more money from that album than an artist who debuted at number 2 ever will. One of them said it plainly. When you diversify, when your eggs are not all in the one basket, the first week is not the paycheck. It is the press release. And that is verifiable, unlike everything else in this story. Rick Ross has spent a decade building a genuinely enviable portfolio. Property, hospitality, beverages, media, a car show that is now an annual institution. He is one of the more competent business people rap has produced, and the irony of him being humiliated over money by a man whose whole counterargument is also about business is not lost on me. And Ross himself understood exactly which frame he needed to fight for. Because when he finally spoke at length, he did not argue about units at all. He went philosophical, and I have to admit, it was effective. He talked about being backstage on a 20-year anniversary run. He told people the numbers they were looking at were partial, that streaming and physicals had not fully landed. And then he said the thing that got clipped and shared more than any other thing he said all week. He told young artists not to let a first week make or break them. He compared it to a painter finishing a piece with no idea what it would eventually be worth, and pointed out that the value shows up generations later. Then he called Set in Stone the album of the year, told the true hip-hop listeners not to fall for propaganda, said to go to the product, and reminded everybody that when other people were doing 1 million first week, he was doing 150,000. And 20 years later, he is still standing here. Now, is that spin? Obviously it is spin. It is world-class spin. But it is also, and this is what people miss, structurally accurate. The men doing 1 million first week in 2006 are mostly not in this conversation anymore. Rick Ross is. That is not nothing. That is actually the whole flex. He also said something about the record's construction that almost nobody picked up on, and it reframes the features argument entirely. Ross said that when the beats were being played for him, he asked not to be told who produced them. No names. He did not want big producer names influencing his ear. Sit with that next to the features criticism. A man accused of leaning on other people's names says he deliberately blinded himself to names. Whether you believe him is your business, but it is a real artistic defense, and it got buried under a joke about a wing restaurant. But hold on. Because there is one comparison that came out of this week that did more damage than 50 Cent, Drake, and the seating chart combined, and I have not even mentioned it yet. Larry June. An independent artist, no major label war chest, no 20-feature roster, no arena tour announcement, reportedly opened bigger than Set in Stone that same window. And the second that comparison hit the timeline, it was over. Because a chart position is abstract. A chart position is a number nobody can feel. But being outsold by somebody the mainstream considers your junior? That is a feeling. That lands in the body. Then it happened again from another direction. A first-week figure of roughly 19,700 units from another artist got waved around specifically because it edged past the 17,200 that was circulating for Ross at the time. And whoever held that microphone could not resist the line that finished it off, that Ross needed help, that he needed the Drake stimulus package, and it was not there for him this time. The Drake stimulus package. I have to be honest with you. That is a devastating piece of phrasing, and I hate that it is funny. Because it does something very specific. It reframes an entire 20-year career as subsidized. It suggests that the peaks were not earned, they were granted, and that the grant expired. That is not a joke about an album. That is a joke about a legacy. And it is the single most effective attack anybody landed all week, and I do not think the person who said it fully understood what they had built. Now, deep breath. Because here is where I take the mask off and tell you what I actually think is going on, and it is going to make some of you upset. I do not believe this was ever a sales story. I want you to look at the sequence again with fresh eyes, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Before the album came out, Rick Ross went on record saying he had already been paid for it. Already. Money in hand, before a single unit moved. Whether that is a distribution advance, an upfront, or just Miami talking, I cannot verify the terms and will not pretend to. But he said it out loud, in public, before the numbers existed. Which means the financial outcome of the first week was, from his position, largely already settled before the first week began. So what exactly was the first week for? It was for us. It was content. And every participant in this cycle got paid in a currency that is not units. 50 Cent got a week of the highest engagement he has had in months for the labor cost of typing 40 words into an Instagram caption. That is the greatest return on investment in the entire music industry, and he has been running that exact play unchanged since the Bush administration. He does not need a hit record. He has something better. He has a permanent nemesis with a release schedule. The commentary class got a week of guaranteed content. Every podcast, every panel, every reaction channel, every account with a ring light got 3 days of programming handed to them for free. And the incentive structure there is brutal and nobody says it out loud, so I will. A nuanced take that says 19,000 units is fine for a legacy act in a saturated streaming market gets 4,000 views. A take that says Rick Ross sold 2,000 copies, it is over, gets 2 million. The market pays for the lie. It has never once paid for the correction. And Rick Ross? He got something too, and this is the part that flips the whole thing. He got a level of name saturation that money genuinely cannot buy. In 1 week, the man's name was in every feed in America, attached to Drake, attached to 50 Cent, attached to the biggest ongoing conversations in the genre. He announced a tour. He was already paid. So let me ask the uncomfortable question that nobody on your feed asked you this week. Who actually lost? Because when I run the ledger, I struggle to find the body. He got paid before release, got a top 40 debut, got total cultural saturation, and gets to sell tickets on the back of the notoriety. 50 Cent got a free news cycle. The blogs got a free week. The algorithm got its engagement. Drake did not have to say a single word and got positioned as the sun that everything else orbits. The only people who lost anything this week were the listeners who never got a fair conversation about whether the actual album is any good. Because I sat with it. And whatever you think of the man, the pen is still there. The wordplay is still there. The voice, that ridiculous, cavernous, unmistakable voice, is still one of the best-sounding instruments this genre ever produced. And almost nobody talked about a single bar on it, because bars do not trend and spreadsheets do. That is the real story. Not the flop. The substitution. We swapped the music criticism for accounting, and then we did not even do the accounting correctly. Now let me close the loop I opened at the very top, because I promised you I would, and I keep my promises. I asked you whether Rick Ross flopped or whether Rick Ross got flopped. Here is where I land, and you are free to disagree loudly. Commercially? 19,000 units and a number 39 debut for a 20-year veteran in this market is unremarkable. It is neither triumph nor disaster. It is a Tuesday. Dozens of legacy artists did the same or worse this year, and nobody made a graphic about it. Narratively, Rick Ross got flopped. Absolutely, comprehensively, and with premeditation. The story that reached the public was not the story the data supported. The number the public repeated was never real. The correction, when it came, went up and nobody covered it. The comparison points chosen were selected specifically for maximum humiliation. And the man best positioned to profit from the humiliation had his caption ready before the chart was. That is not a flop. That is a mugging with a laugh track. But I am not letting Rick Ross walk out of here clean either, because that would be dishonest and you did not come here for a press release. Rick Ross handed them the gun. Let us be completely honest about that. Nobody made him spend a rollout talking about Drake. Nobody made him call another man's album horrendous 3 weeks before his own release date. Nobody made him stand on a stage and strip the Drake vocals out of one of the most beloved records in his own catalog and turn it into a bit. Nobody made him question whether another artist writes his own material while sitting on a project that is 14 guests deep across 19 tracks. That is the part where the sympathy runs out for me. Because the strategy was internally contradictory. You cannot build a rollout on confrontation and then act surprised when the coverage is about the confrontation instead of the songs. Ross chose the storyline. The storyline just did not choose him back. And there is a version of this week that does not exist, and I think about it constantly. A version where Rick Ross drops a 19-track luxury rap record on his 20-year anniversary, says absolutely nothing about anybody, gives 3 interviews about production and pen game, lets the features speak, and quietly debuts at number 39 with 19,000 units. Same numbers. Identical numbers. And in that version, nobody makes a single meme, because with no villain, 19,000 is just a number on a chart nobody reads. The numbers did not create this week. The narrative did. And Rick Ross co-wrote the narrative. So where does this leave everybody standing? 50 Cent walks away as the undisputed champion of a sport only he competes in, which is turning other people's release weeks into his content calendar. And credit where it is due to Curtis. The man has weaponized patience. He does not chase. He waits. He waits for the chart, for the seating map, for the projection, and then he arrives with one sentence and leaves. That is discipline. Ugly, relentless discipline, but discipline. Drake walks away without having lifted a finger, which is its own kind of statement. Not a post. Not a bar. Not a subliminal. And somehow half the analysis of another man's album was about him. That is what actual gravitational pull looks like, and it is exactly why the pick-a-side era is so dangerous for everybody who is not him. When you build your rollout in opposition to Drake, you do not get to control the frame anymore. He does. Passively. By existing. And Rick Ross walks away with a top 40 album, a paid invoice, a tour to sell, a wildly expanded news footprint, and a genuine question sitting on his desk that no amount of shade at Shreveport can answer for him. The question is not whether Rick Ross can still rap. He obviously can. The question is whether he still wants to be a recording artist, or whether he has already quietly become something else, a brand, an operator, an institution, and the albums are now marketing for the empire rather than the other way around. Because if it is the second one, 19,000 units is not a failure. It is a rounding error on a much larger balance sheet. And everybody who spent this week laughing was analyzing the wrong business. Now here is the loop I am leaving open, and I want you to actually think about it before you scroll. Somebody said 2000 first. Somebody typed that number before any chart body published anything. Somebody put it on a graphic. Somebody pushed it. Within hours it was repeated by accounts with millions of followers as though it came from an official source, which it never did. That fake number shaped an entire week of coverage and permanently attached itself to a 20-year career. And nobody, not one person, has been asked where it came from. I am not accusing anybody of anything. I do not know who started it, and I would not print a guess. But understand what it means that a number can be invented on a Monday, treated as fact by Wednesday, quietly corrected upward by Friday, and the correction reaches maybe 2% of the people who saw the lie. That is not a hip-hop problem. That is every subject you care about. Rap is just where the machinery is easiest to see, because everybody involved is loud. So let me hand this over to you, because I genuinely want to know where you land. First question. Do you believe the Drake situation actually cost Rick Ross real units, or do you think that is a comfortable excuse the internet reached for because it makes a better story than the market for a legacy rap album is small now? Second question. Did 50 Cent influence this narrative, or did he just show up early to a fire he did not start and take a photo in front of it? Because the timing genuinely matters and I go back and forth on it hourly. Third question, and this is the one I actually care about. Have you listened to Set in Stone? Not the discourse. Not the clips. The album. Because if you formed a full opinion on a 19-track project based on a seating chart and a caption, then respectfully, you are not a critic. You are a participant in somebody else's marketing. Tell me all three in the comments and be specific, because I read them and I am going to pull the best ones into the follow-up. And there is a follow-up because I am not done. There is a whole second layer to this that I could not fit here, the tour economics, the venue level numbers, what the actual routing looks like, and whether the buy one get one deal was label-driven, promoter-driven, or artist-approved. That distinction changes the entire story, and I have been pulling on that thread all week. That is the next one. Until then, do me a favor. The next time a number shows up on your feed attached to somebody's career, wearing a laughing emoji and no source, ask one question before you press share. Who benefits if I believe this? Because somebody always does. And this week, it was never going to be Rick Ross. Tell me where you land in the comments. Hit that like button if this made you look at the whole week differently. Subscribe so the follow-up finds you instead of you having to hunt for it. And I will be right back here when the next chapter of this thing breaks, because with these two, there is always a next chapter. Later, y'all.